Well, Happy New Year. 2024, I'm going to concentrate on two things this year. And you know what those two things are? Let's go to our next slide and let's find out and let's talk about this. This is going to be a tumultuous year and we need to concentrate. So here's what we're thinking. We only want to worry about two things, just two things. We work with investors every single day, and these are the only things they care about. So let me move my next slide. They care about making money and not losing money. And that is probably the most important thing that we need to be worried about this year is not losing money. So let me go to my slide. Let's talk about our performance here in the last couple of years here. So here's our concerns. These are really two things that we're really most concerned about. I think most of you investors should be concerned about this, is that we feel that the real estate cycle is completing. I know it runs on a cycle. It runs about 18 years. Nothing says it can't be 17 and a half. And here in Phoenix, it was 19 and a half 1 year. So it's not an exact science, but we get certain signposts along the way, and those signposts have materialized, and we're looking at them right now. So I'm very, very confident that the real estate cycle is completing. And of course, going up on the one side of that cycle is so much fun. Everybody's making money, but they're coming down. People are losing money hands over fists, which goes to rule number 2. We don't want to lose money. And then the other concern that we have is the economic and demographic shifts that we see just taking place all across the country, all across the globe. And how do we take advantage of that? So let's just go to my next slides here. Now, as you know, I run my own timing model. You can see these models all over the internet. Everybody has a little bit of a different take on it. Here's what I've learned is that each region is just slightly different, but they do run on an 18-year cycle. We seem to repeat these things over and over again. And you know, when I talk to Dr. Nenner, Dr. Nenner is much better at this than I am. So mine aren't quite as sophisticated as his, but mine is completing. And all the signposts are in. So that tells me that we're done. Now, I've made a couple of very, very good calls. We're going to talk about that as to when we stop buying and putting new money in. Because, again, we want to make money. But number one thing, when you get into these jeopardy periods like right now, you can lose money. So we don't want to lose any money in this. So let's talk about how we're going to make some money, how we're just going to make a ton of money. We're going to make just fortunes, but not yet. It's coming. So all we want to do is preserve our capital. So let me go to my next slide. So if you take a look at this slide here, so just take a really, really close look. This is coming out of Federal Reserve electronic data. This is what my timing model showed, was that when we got to Q1 of 2022, so really March, April timeframe, it was really kind of flowed into 2022 or April of 2022. I noticed that my model went negative. My model showed us that at that time, prices were going to start to decline, and sure enough, they have. They've declined right through to Q1 2023. It's been almost like a straight line going straight down. Now they recovered a little bit. That's very, very common for these cycles. Probably not going to reach the next peak. I've got a couple of slides here I want you to take a look at so that you can see these. Let me go to the next slide. You can take a look at it. Now, as you know, you can take a look. This is also from the Federal Reserve electronic data system. We're looking at this, and you can see that on all transactions here in Phoenix that there's absolutely a peak. Now, this is the change from a year ago. This is the appreciation rate and the prices. So you can see that from April 2022 right straight down through 2023, prices just declined almost in a straight line. You know, they came down about 12%. So that was a pretty severe decline. They have recovered a little bit. That's not unusual for that. Let me go to my next slide, and we'll just talk about that as well. Let me see if I can get into a little better chart so we can look at this a little better. You can see me on here. So now I'm going to tell you, when we start looking at this chart here, let me go to my next one. You can see this is a percent change, and it changed pretty drastically. So had we purchased properties in March, April, May of 2022, anything afterwards we'd have lost money on. So the value of the property would have declined, and it would have declined 5 to 12% as to where we are today. So my model identified that. I could see that we were coming to the top of the market, and that we were maxing out. I saw that we came into peak number one, and of course, peak number one is a little bit of a lag. So when we called that peak in March of 2022, we didn't get confirmed until really 4 or 5 months later, after all the data came in. And yes, indeed, March of 2022 was peak number one. So now, had we placed new capital at that time, everyone we would have placed capital, if we refer back to rule number 2, they all would have lost money. And that's just strictly timing. Remember, we went into the accumulation phase in really April of 2020. That was really fun. That's when we wanted to buy everything we possibly could. They all ran up. We made money, and every last property we bought, we made money, and we quit buying in March of 2022. Now that impacts my business. I get paid every time one of my transactions close. So we're not one of these shops that say, "Hey, go buy something so we can have a fee." We're not interested in that. We have a relationship with our clients, and we want you to make money. Had you bought in March of 2022, those properties would have gone down. Now there are some exceptions. So let me go to my next slide. Let's just talk about what we're talking about here. So let me just take a look close at this. Now, one of the reasons that we looked at this is that there are cycles running. So we have a housing cycle, and then we have a couple other cycles that are running. There's the liquidity cycle and a real estate cycle. These are the ones that affect real estate. And you can see the liquidity cycle at the same time as my housing model was topping out. The liquidity also peaked the same month. And you can just follow it. If you take a look at that chart, you can see that the very peak was April of 2022. It's the same month that real estate peaked, which I find very amazing, but that is just what happens. You have these cycles that are running concurrent with each other. Now, if you look a little further down the curve, you can see a big pop. That was March of 2023 when the banks went bad. So can you imagine that? The banks went bad and they put liquidity in. They put in not just a little bit, they put in $300 billion, and the rest of the central banks around the globe put in another $200 billion. So we put almost $500 billion in liquidity, and the markets popped. It quit going down. So we got another peak there, and that was not unsurprising. Now, they do that when they put liquidity, and that liquidity shows up in the stock market almost immediately. So that's why in October of this year, they put some more liquidity. Not much. They put 60 billion, but that's still quite a bit. It popped the markets, the stock market and the bond market both went up. And the same with real estate. So we got a little bit of pop. Now you can see that. So let me go to my next slide and see if we can see it even better here. Now I want you to look really close at this one. So I'm going to blow this up a little bit. Now this is done by John Wake here in Phoenix, Arizona. This is Phoenix, Arizona. I'm going to tell you, I want you to look really close. This is one of the best graphs I've ever seen. Now, whenever you look at one of our models, we're showing you a stylized version. Within the model itself, typically there's two peaks, and you can see in the red on the other, you can see in the green here in 2005 and 2007, there are actually three peaks, but the first two are the most important, and they came in right on time. And again, so if you look at my arrow up on top, follow that green line all the way up, almost to the top, because it was an explosive ride. You can see in May of 2022, we got peak number one, came in right on time. Again, this data is typically coming in 3 or 4 months late because it's gathered. And then you can see peak number two came in June 2023. That was exactly when they put in that extra liquidity. Now, this happens all the time. We just don't know the reason for it, but it just happens. So that's what happens when you start looking at cycle research, because these things just happen. So peak number one and peak number two are in. And what happens after peak number two is rates decline and prices decline. The rates decline because we go into a recession. Typically, whenever we see this thing, when the prices of real estate start to decline, the recession is not very far behind. It's one of the signposts for a recession is the real estate coming down. The real estate coming down has its own signposts, but all the signposts are coming together. So had you bought something in March of 2022, when we quit buying, we quit putting new money in March of 2022. So if you'd have come to us and say, I want to buy property, would have told you no, unless you're doing a 1031 exchange. And I'm going to talk to that in just a little bit. but we put no new money out, and you would have been losing money. Now, there is going to come a time here where we're going to make so much money, it's going to be unbelievable. It's going to be just, people aren't going to believe how much money we can make, but we're going to. So we are at peak number 2. We've gone beyond that. We've had 4 or 5 months of decline, and nothing's come back. So it has verified peak number 2 as well. Let me go by the next slide. Let's just talk about that. Now, I think this is where we're at. Now, this is my stylized version of the next couple slides that you're going to see. We're at the top. Now, that's the jeopardy period. That means anything that we buy from here on in does have a possibility of declining pretty severely. This can decline pretty severely. Let me go to the next slide. Now, I get this courtesy of Charles U. Smith. I've used this before because it's absolutely incredible data. And this is just filling in our data and just putting it into a symmetrical, because housing is symmetrical. So when he went up on that blue line going up to the peak, that was a blast. That was so much fun. That was just so much fun. Everybody's making money, going to cocktail parties, saying how much money you're making, how smart you are, and how if one's good, 10's got to be so much better. And if I can buy 100, I'm going to do that. And then you come to the top and you start rolling over to the red line, and that red line is probably a 30 to 35% decline, is what Charles U. Smith is forecasting. And it could be a 65%, 60% or 65% decline, because the 2008 clearinghouse, remember, these are cleansing periods. So in 2008, we were cleansing all the bad wood out of the forest. We were getting rid of all that malinvestment, and it never completed. So if we complete that cycle, we're going to go down 60 or 65% from the peak, and that can be very, very painful. So we are very, very cautious as to what we're putting out. This is your money that you entrust to me. I'm pretty conservative with this. So let me go to my next slide. Now, when we get into these bad recessions, we're going to have bad things that are going to start happening. They're already happening now. We don't always know why, but we do know what. So what is, we're going to have civil problems around the country. We're going to have a change of demographics and a change of economics is coming. Now, how do you take advantage of that? Now, let's go to rule number 1. We want to make money. So how do we make money? And rule number 2 is, how do we not lose money? So let me just go through rule number 2. If you are in any of these cities, you are certainly at risk as a real estate investor. Actually, as any business person. If you're in Chicago, I want you to understand it. In Chicago, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, been there over 100 years. It's called the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. They put the city of Chicago on notice that all their leases are completed. They're getting ready to expire. They sold all the real estate that they own. And if the crime and the taxes and all the problems of Chicago don't start getting resolved, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange is leaving. Now, Citadel has left. So a lot of these places are leaving. And that's in Chicago. You start talking about Portland. Who on their right mind in Portland would want to encourage drug users to come into their city? Because that's what they've done. They've almost legalized drugs completely. So if you have heroin, or you have cocaine, or you have methamphetamine or LSD, and you're caught on your person, it's a parking ticket. They slap you $100 fine. Well, if you're a drug user, this is a great place for you to go to. If you've got a family, maybe not so much. So you have to ask yourself, what happened to Detroit and Baltimore, who are not on our list? They're not on our list because they are failed cities. And all these cities on our list have the possibility of failing, and this is not a complete list. So if your city is having trouble, if the founders of your city are not the people in charge, and you've got people who are doing things in your city that you don't agree with, or you're being taxed to death. California just made all illegals eligible for health care. How in the world are they going to afford that? The only way to do that is by raising taxes. And who do they raise taxes on? The people with money and the people who are working. So if you're working or you got money, you should start thinking how I'm going to get out of these places. So let's just talk about rule number 2. I don't want to lose money. So if you're in one of these cities, you have the possibility of losing a lot. I'm not talking like 10 or 15%. We're talking about losing 60, 70, 80, 90% of your value of your investments over 5 years. I mean, if you're okay with that, then fine. You know, if you're not, then let's start putting on our thinking cap and let's go to rule number one. How am I going to make money? Well, I'll tell you, there's a whole lot better investment environments than what is in these cities. You can find Florida, Texas, and Arizona. Now, Florida is starting to be overbuilt and overwhelmed at the moment, but it's going to make for a great, great place to buy. Same with Texas. You know, you hear these stories about Austin. They're coming into the completion phase. And yes, of course, we're going to have some problems in the meantime. But when they've finished, the demographics and the long-term value for these markets is just phenomenal. Now, here in Phoenix, we're just unbelievable. You know, but we're not going to be immune from problems either. Our prices are going to come down too. Probably not as much as some of the other places, but we have our own problems. You know, people got over exuberant with these VRBOs. You know, we've got a little bit too much being built. But with all the people coming across the border, housing is going to be in short supply. So it's going to be in demand. But it needs to be in the right places for you. So how are you going to move from, say, Chicago or Portland to Phoenix or Texas or Arizona? We'd like you to come here. The dynamics here are just off the charts. They're just phenomenal. Let me go to my next slide and let's just talk about this. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you're an investor, you can buy like for like. And that like for like on a 1031 exchange is just enormous. Anything that's held for investment in real estate, you can buy. You can sell a vacant lot and buy a house. You can buy a house and buy multifamily. You can sell multifamily and buy houses. You can sell multifamily and buy office buildings. You can buy rentals. You can sell rentals and buy vacant land. Anything that's held for investment. Now, nobody wants to do these pay the tax because we've had this enormous runoff, and this is really good. You've had some tremendous wealth creation. You'd like to keep that. This is what I'm talking to you, is that you want to move from one of these endangered markets to one that's got much better futures. So I would think that you may want to start thinking of doing a 1031 exchange, and that is a tax deferred exchange. So there's no tax implications on it. You know, so there's some very, very simple rules to do, but you can easily do this. You can easily sell a rental in. Now, I've had clients do this. I've had clients sell condos in Seattle, and they come here to Phoenix, and the prices in Seattle are so expensive that they can buy 2 houses here in Phoenix for the same kind of money. I've had people do that in Washington, Oregon, certainly in California. They come here, they sell a condo, they can buy 2 houses. And of course, they get houses here, they get better diversification, and they get much better upside potential. And in the long run here for Phoenix, it's just phenomenal. And there's no tax implications at the moment. They're all deferred. It just rolled over. So you do not pay taxes on it. It's a tax deferred exchange. Now, everybody says, oh, it's expensive. No, it's not. So for you to sell your condo in Seattle and do a 1031 exchange, it costs you $800 to handle the sale of your condo. And then you come here to Phoenix and you buy 2 houses, it's $400 a house. So if you want to buy 1 house, you sell 1 condo for $800, you buy another one, costs you $400 in 1031 exchange fees. So for $1,200, you can get out of Seattle and get into Phoenix, and get into Scottsdale, get into Peoria for $1,200, and you don't pay any tax on it. What a great deal. Now, we do this all the time. Now, that we're just fine with that. We think it's just you're taking seasoned money that's already at risk, and you're taking it out of one market, moving it to another market that has much better opportunities. We're just fine with you doing that. So give me a call. Let me go to my next slide. I'll tell you how you can get a hold of me. So this is where I'm at. I'm at West USA in Phoenix, Arizona. West USA is a billion-dollar firm. I think we did $5.5 or $6 billion last year. I didn't do all that, of course, but the firm did. They keep us in compliance, and they do all our paperwork for us. You can reach our main switchboard, 602-942-4200. Set an appointment. You know, get your questions written out, and talk to your financial advisor, your spouse, certainly. Anyone that advises you at all, let's do a conference call. We can do a video, and let's talk to each other and see how we fit in. So happy New Year to you, and my very, very best. Bye-bye now.